Okay.
Okay.
All right, you can start. Tell me who you are and,
I'm Edwin Hostetter, former owner of the Hostetter's Clothing and Shoe Store in Palmyra. I was born in Lebanon and met my wife Lucille, who was born in Palmyra, back in 1941. I was a head usher at the State Theater in Lebanon on Cummins Street, and Lucille's brother was the manager. And of course she'd come down to visit her brother and his family, and I was there at the theater. And I graduated from Lebanon High School in 1942, enlisted in the Air Force in October 1942, and went to basic training in Florida, and was shipped overseas to England in 1943, and after the war in 45 I came home, and Lucille and I were married in September 1945. Went to housekeeping for 2 months in Lebanon. She worked at the Gap, and I got a part-time job at the Gap. And in January of 1946, we moved to Philadelphia. I went to Pierce School, which is now Pierce College, for 30 months. Lucille came back to Lebanon and Palmyra, where her parents lived. Upon graduation in 1948 from Pierce, we moved to New Holland for a year. We were both working in New Holland Machine Company, but we were both laid off after a year because they had a big reduction. And that was in July 1949, her father, who worked at San Georgia Macaroni Company for 30 years, a controller, passed away. And fortunately, I was able to take his job in Lebanon, where I worked till 1955. And we moved to Palmyra in September 1949. And in 1950, of course, I worked in Lebanon, but I did accounting and bookwork for the businesses here in Palmyra. One of them was ASK. I was their first accountant for Bob DiMatteo and Abe Kettering. And I also did Mark Memorial Works for Joe Mark. And I did also Sherwood Kiefer, a builder here in Palmyra. And I also did Ed Keeney. He owned Keeney's Shoes and Clothing Store. And I also did work for a plumber in Quentin. In 1955, I left San Georgia because Ed Keeney wanted to sell his men's clothing department. So I purchased it in 1955, in August of 1955. And Keeney's men's clothing originated with Arb Disney back in 1936.
okay.
He had the men's clothing store on the south side, which was kind of around the Hollywood shop. And,
On Main Street, we're talking south side of Main Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Arb, then in 1942, I believe he was drafted in the Army, so he liquidated his men's clothing store and stored his equipment. And he came back from the service and was going to open a men's store, but he built a new home, and he ran into a lot of additional expense because of rock in Palmyra. So he had no money to open the store. So Ed Keeney supplied the inventory. He bought the fixtures from Arb, and he bought the inventory and opened the men's clothing store. In the meantime, Ed Keeney had bought in 1943 Mara Shoe Store, which was down on Locust and Main Street, which was owned by Plain Mr. Myers and his family. Mary Kreider was one of the employees, and
Okay.
Fanny, his daughter, they worked in the shoe store. And Ed Keeney bought the Mara Shoe Store in 1943 and moved it up to the old Monarch grocery store building, and which was also the former Palmyra post office.
Right, and that's in the first block of the north side of Main Street from Railroad
It's
West.
now been
Right.
torn down.
Right.
And that's where he opened up, then on the west side of this building, he opened up Arb Keeney's men's clothing store. So they were there together. Well, in I believe it was in 1950, 1954, Ed and Arb didn't get along too well. So Arb left and went down to the state liquor store in the shopping center in Palmyra. And then he hired another fellow, and he wanted to get out of the clothing business. And I wanted to leave the San Giorgio Macaroni because it was a family affair, and there was 10 in the family. And I was the controller there and the accountant. So I knew there was no future. So Katie and I got together, and I took over the men's store because I had worked part-time when I was in high school in Lebanon at the Lawns clothing store. So I had some experience in the store. And from that time then, Katie operated the shoe side and I operated the men's clothing store, and we enlarged the men's side and we put in boys' clothing, so we had boys and men's. Well, Ed Keeney got sick in 1980, and in 81 he passed away, so I bought the shoe store. And then in 1960, and the building was owned by J. Early Stauffer, the Iceman in Palmyra.
Okay.
So I wanted to buy the building, but Mrs. Stauffer wouldn't sell it to me. So fortunately, in 1960, the end of 1962, the Trinity United, not the United Church of Christ, wanted to build a new church out at their present location. So they owned the loose property, which was right next door. And the next door to the loose property was Smith's Funeral Home. So I was able to arrange financing to Attorney Al Lewis to buy the loose property. We tore that down and we built a store there in '63. September '63 we moved there to the new store, and we added the ladies' clothing store, the ladies' clothing line, which was very successful. And in the meantime, in '62, Smith the undertaker passed away. So we, of course, we were able to buy that property because the Lebanon National Bank had it for sale. And after we moved into the new clothing store, Harold Herr from Herr Electric came to see me and said, how about getting together with some of the merchants and putting a parking lot in the Smith's Funeral Home property, which we did. And that included Mark Ferry, Bill Gingrich, Harold Page, the drugstore, and Bud Locke, myself, Harold Herr, and Roy Miller. And yeah, and the buildings were torn down by what's the bus company's name for the
Bucks.
Out in Palmyra for the school district?
Bucks.
Bucks boys made a deal that they would tear down the property for all the materials, and then the parking lot developed there.
So Smith's Funeral Home was just where the parking lot is?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Because there was an alley, the building right next to the alley. There was a little alley in between Smith's Funeral Home. Well, it was Smith's Funeral Home, and then the house where the Smith family lived.
Okay.
Then a little narrow alley, and then the style shop, which was a ladies' shop, was next door. Then we were there for 34, well, we were from 55 to 89. We closed in January 89. We liquidated the inventory. It was a tremendous successful sale. And that was the demise of the Hostetter's Clothing and Shoe Store.
But that was a staple in Palmyra from
That's right.
55 to 89.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people grew up coming in and
That's right.
buying shoes from Mary Kreider and clothing from Denny Newbold.
And your mother was a faithful shoe customer of the Naturalizer shoe.
Yes, she was, she was. And Lucille, we have to have Lucille introduce herself, because Lucille bought a lot of the women's clothing.
Yeah,
I
well,
know, I
she
remember
went
that.
along to buy it.
Yes, yes. Tell us who you are and your story about Palmyra.
I'm Lucille Hostetter, and I don't know where to begin.
Your maiden name?
Your maiden name, right?
My maiden name was Lucille Gingrich, and I was born in Palmyra on Maple Street, and right at home I was born. And of course,
In 1922.
that was in 22. And I went to Palmyra School all through school.
Okay.
And of course, Miss Blauk, I knew her from the our children going to school there. But I can remember every teacher I had from first grade to 12th.
Oh, name some names, because I think other people would remember that.
Miss Turby, Miss Lonnenecker, Miss Blauk, Miss Baum, Mrs. Shirk. She was then how was that? She was married to Charlie Miller, but she was then Miss Shirk.
Lydia.
And I could go on, Miss Rengier, Miss Stauffer, and that was 6th grade.
Okay.
From then I had quite a few, probably some that you might have had in high school.
Okay.
Um,
And you went to the Railroad Street building? But then
yes,
when
I
you,
did.
but then you went to high school in
In-
the Cherry Street building? as well?
In my sophomore year,
Okay.
we moved over to the high school. That was a big day.
Yeah, I bet.
And it was very strange, we had our gym on the stage in that building.
I remember that. I still remember that as well.
And I had, that time, I had Miss, she's still living down in Annandale, for our gym teacher. She's the only one of our teachers that's still living, I believe. What
I
was
think they were there though.
Miss Brandt.
Brand.
She is now Mrs., her husband died, I can't think of his name. But anyway, I really enjoyed all of them. All of them good teacher, and I enjoyed everybody.
And then your children went through Palmyra School District
Our
as well?
children went through the Palmyra schools. As I said, Barbara's, we were right on the fringe area. She went 2 years to 2 years, I believe, to Forge, 2 at Pine and 2 back at Forge. And then through high school, they went all the way through.
Tell them that you already graduated in 68.
And
And Barbara
Eddie graduated in 68. Barbara,
72.
yes, she was 4 years younger.
She graduated.
And the day that the art store closed was Monday. No, the day that our store closed was a Saturday. Monday before that, our daughter died in childbirth.
I didn't realize
That
it
was the
right
week
then.
before, while we were closing.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was quite a shock.
Yes.
And we helped raise her little girls for a short time until he got nanny. Let's see.
You went along by it on the buying trips.
Right, you went to, I remember you coming back and having been in New York City, which was big
Oh, yeah.
stuff to me at that time. Philadelphia, you went to
Oh,
on
yeah,
buying
we went
trips.
buying on trips, and also our salesman came to our store. I worked in the store only like as a substitute when somebody couldn't work. But I enjoyed that, meeting all the people, and it was nice.
Did you have anyone, I'm trying to think, did you have anyone who started with you in 55 and was there in 89? Mary would have been the, or
Yeah,
did you?
Mary was there till we closed. Yeah, of course in 55, Mary would have been working for me, not
Okay.
before 61.
Okay.
And
So there was nobody who started with you and then was there the whole time?
no, not really. In fact, my first full-time or part-time employee was a graduate of Palmyra. And Dr. Wolfgang, he became a surgeon and was the head of the Geisinger surgical department. And our first full-time employee was Jim Wallers from Hershey. He turned out to be a professor at Brown University. He was a minister. And let's see.
He's still teaching part-time.
Part-time out in Arkansas.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
So you had a hand in the growth and development of some,
oh yeah.
the Palmyraites and.
I just received Dr. Wolfgang just sent me a 3-page letter. It's amazing, because he worked his way through Lebanon Valley College and Jefferson Medical School, and he served in the Navy. And he's about, he's around 70.
That's great. And was he a Palmyra? Did he grow up in Palmyra?
Yeah, in fact, his mother was divorced but bought her parents' home in Palmyra.
This is the one on Maple Street.
No,
Back on Lincoln.
Back on Lincoln, and that's where I remember your mother being, was on the
Yes.
Lincoln Street house.
you want to talk about the theater, Billy?
Oh, let's do that. I forgot about that. Please, let's do that.
I gotta
Okay.
switch tapes.
Okay, this is a good transition.
Well, in 1963, Seltzer's Theater had been empty for a few years, and it was put up for sale. Bill Erb, the realtor, had it for sale. And he came to me after we had moved in our new store and so forth, and indicated that they wanted to sell the Seltzer Theater for around $32,000. So I went over and looked at it, at least the surroundings and so forth. And I went to see Harold Herr, the GE dealer, and of course Harold and I always got along, and Harold was known to be a tight individual, but anything that I came up with, Harold would seemingly always go along. He had a lot of faith in me. And in the meantime, he talked to Roy Miller, and we got together, and we formed a corporation with some of the other merchants in town. Ralcon was the name of the company that we had. The R stood for real estate, Bill Erb, who had the property, and the A stood for appliances, Harold Herr, and the L stood for lawyer, Al Lewis, Sr., and the C stood for clothing, myself, and the O stood for, R-A-L-C-O, and O stood for oil, for Roy Miller,
Okay.
and L stood for, wait a minute, was that the L?
Right.
C-O-N, N stood for newspapers, Bud Locke, and D stood for drugs, Harold Page.
Oh.
So we all put money into the corporation, and Al Lewis being a member, and we made Bill Erb, the realtor, put his commission from the sale of the theater, which was sold for $32,000, to the Ralcon Corporation. And then I was president of Ralcon, and I went to see Mrs. Jaffe, who owned the Lee 5 and 10 building and Shutter's Bar and so forth. She lived in Harrisburg because she had been originally the resident of Palmyra, but her husband had passed away. And after negotiations with her and her son, who I believe had gone to Palmyra schools, why the Ralcon Corporation bought the theater, the Jaffe building, which is 5 and 10, for $29,000. So we went to the two banks for financing, and we went to the Borough Council to get them on the idea of selling them part of the corner, to cut the corner so that the north and south railroads would be more straight in line, north and south. And after many months of negotiations with the Borough Hall, the Borough Council, well, they finally decided to buy a piece of the corner that you see that's now in greens and so forth. And of course we developed it. We hired a newcomer, Richard Newcomer. Harold Light came along on that, on the Ralcon also, because he did the engineering for us and everything, and he was also a shareholder in the thing. And that's how that developed. We borrowed the money from the bank, and the banks made some contributions to the organization as far as developing the theater into what is now the theater. And in 1990, Ralcon sold the building to the sporting goods people that are there now, Provone and Christie. And I think now they sold it to another party.
Okay,
That's
so the
also-
theater, well, those of us who remember the Seltzer's Theater, it's really where that, what's the name of it? The Christick's building.
Yeah, that's the original theater
That
building.
was the original theater building,
Yeah,
'cause
and
I
we tore the entrance away and all the way up to the corner.
Oh, because I was thinking they destroyed the theater and put that there new, but that
No,
was the
no,
original
that
theater.
was the theater. And
Oh.
we leveled the floor, because the theater floor slanted.
Right,
We leveled the floor with a stage, and we put a second floor on it, because the theater was that high, about 24 feet high.
yeah. Now, did the Lee's 5 and 10, that you said the Yaffes owned the
Yeah.
building, how long was Lee's 5 and 10 open? Up until that time?
Yeah,
When you-
oh
when you
yeah.
actually
In fact,
bought-
the deal was then that Lee would move into the main part, which is now the sporting goods store.
Okay,
And then Lee moved in there. We finished the building, at least for Lee's, so they could move out, so we could tear down the building in front.
now, when does that big fire that took place, that was behind that, is that
Yeah,
right?
the apartment, Palm, what was it called? Palm Plaza, I guess, yeah, Palm Plaza.
And
which
was
had-
that on Railroad Street behind
That was
Lee's?
facing,
Facing
Railroad
Railroad.
Street, yeah. And that was behind the first portion of the borough's land. And that burned, I believe, was it in the 70s or the 80s? I believe.
80s, I think, because I wasn't around at the time,
Yeah.
but people keep talking about the big fire, and we have
Well,
pictures
that
of
would have
it.
been, I didn't look that up.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. So you envision that by tearing down Lee's and that the borough could straighten it out, but they never
Well,
did
that, and
straighten
also
it.
it would provide parking, and we could open up little storerooms facing east,
Okay,
all along the side of the theater building.
right.
Where the Christix is in, well, that's all one room there.
Mhm,
That was on the west side,
mhm.
and it all
So,
worked out.
so
pretty
all
well.
those little stores and restaurants and things that are along facing east were all part of that?
That's right.
Okay.
The jewelry store was in the corner, which was Bowman the jeweler in Palmyra. He moved into the front portion. And then behind him was Grace Insurance and Travel. Behind him was Shutter's Bar, and the barber shop was at the end,
Okay, going south.
at the alley
Railroad,
by the
right.
church.
And then, yeah, that's right, there is parking in there.
Yeah,
I forgot about that. Well, thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Appreciate that.
I thought I have pictures of them tearing it down there and the loose property, but I couldn't put my finger on them.
Okay, that's how
I
I
have them
am.
someplace.
I have these things all over the place. I have no idea where I know I have a whole book, and I know where it is, I just have to get it out, of, 1960 when we had the bicentennial and all the things that took place then, and I have scrapbook of that kind of stuff.
Well,
I
we
should-
have one of 1936, and we have one of 1914.
1910.
1910.
Do you
Yeah.
have one of those? Oh, those are valuable. Those are valuable books to have. Make sure Eddie doesn't throw those away. Tell him that these are valuable books and he
Oh, he
needs to
keeps everything.
Oh, okay. Well, so do I.
Bob would keep them, but I don't know about Eddie might, if we tell him.
Yeah, you should tell him, that's what I'm saying, tell him. And if he doesn't want them, tell him that there are people in Palmyra who do. Believe me, we've found that. Have you been into the headquarters?
Well, originally when I signed up for the book,
Okay. Okay. Did
and
you
it gave
look
him some
around?
information about our class and so forth of 1940, although I think they had the big picture. And
Oh, is one of those pictures your class?
Mhm.
Oh, gosh.
when they went to Washington.
Right, okay, I know which one it is then. I'll have to look for you. Will I recognize you?
Oh, you will. I had long hair though.
Were you in the front row?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, it brings back all kinds of memories sitting there. I think of Mary Kreider often, you know. Denny Lupald's name comes up all the time for working on the men's.
I'm
side.
thinking you were there about 1970.
No, 1960, I finished in 1967. I worked maybe 1964.
Yeah, but didn't you work then when you
Did I
went to
come
college?
back a little? Yeah, I
In-
came
in-
back,
in
yeah,
Christmas
up
time.
until about 1970, probably I was, yeah.
What year did you graduate from? college?
71.
71.
Do you remember the old
Early.
parish hall?
The old,
Back on College Street?
Schneider's
That's where
place that
Schneider
burned
was.
down.
no, I don't remember that. I hear a lot about it though. In fact, Mrs. Mauer is coming in. Do you know Mrs. Mauer, Lorraine Mauer? And she was telling me she lived there until
When
the
the fire
fire.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
until the fire. And I hear about Mr. Now, is that Mr. Schneider, Fred Schneider's father?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm going to interview Fred Schneider.
Good,
Yes.
because we just talked to him at the doctor's office
Well,
the
then
other
you'll
day.
hear about it.
Oh, before I talk to him, I guess. I'll tell him that you said you talked to him, okay. Because he was giving me a hard time, I don't know.
Well, I was talking to him because Lucille worked for his father
Ah.
when she was in high school.
Yeah, right.
And she made $7.50 for 48 hours of work.
Oh, my gosh.
I worked, yeah,
That was in 1937,
about
38.
38.
Oh,
Oh, wait a minute, yeah.
$7.50 for a week.
Yeah.
Well, was that where the printing business was? In
Yes.
that building that
Yes.
burned?
No, it's still standing.
Oh,
In fact, I
Oh,
told him, I
they
said, I
should-
don't understand it, it hasn't burnt yet.
They should
because
tear
of-
it down.
It's all frame.
awful. Right along the railroad.
oh, it's down farther. Is that the one that now they have a nightclub in?
They're what?
A nightclub? They have a nightclub for teenagers.
No, no,
That's
that,
that yellow building.
No,
that's
no.
a yellow building facing the railroad.
Right.
That's
This
where
one's
the
ready
Schneider
to go.
printed.
It's horrible.
Oh, I'll have to
But
look and see.
the nightclub, you're talking about the, up in Railroad Street.
Oh, that was the,
The livery stable, that
Yeah.
other nightclub, where Lee's then ended up,
that,
right? Isn't that where
No,
Lee?
that's where the apartment house was. That burned.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
so it was back farther.
our-
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, we hear that, there's a picture in the book.
The
and,
one book, a great picture inside the place.
Mhm.
The
That's what- I
the
just copied
tables
that.
and everything, the dance hall and all.
Yeah.
Oh,
Balcony
that-
Did
around
you used
it.
to go there?
No.
Oh,
The
okay.
people, though, people in town really, they thought that was terrible.
But the
And they
one,
would go,
Sure.
I remember there were windows along the side, and people would go and snoop in the windows to see.
Well, Helen Bucks just told me, Helen Warfel just told me that Helen Donor used to work there.
Oh, she might have.
Yeah, she said
Yes.
Helen Donor used
the
to
one
work there.
place the kids used to hang out is down at Risser's
Oh, yes.
They kept talking about
Farmers.
Risser's.
Farmers.
Farmer's
Farmers.
Restaurant. Okay.
And then behind the restaurant was a big dance hall.
Oh.
And all the kids, I went there, my brother went there, everybody went down there, and they had a Nickelodeon, we would dance to the music. We had a
And
really good
that's
time.
where the Western Auto used to be, which is now used furniture. She's selling
Yeah.
used furniture in
Yeah.
there.
Yes, I think, I didn't, or did she close? I don't know. But she's still there, but I know.
Or did she?
We gotta do this, Steve. We have to, I wanna get a floor plan of Palmyra there and all the stores that were there through the years, you know, at each location.
Oh.
I think that'd be neat.
Well, that
don't you?
list, you could have that list of.
I have that list, and then, and Sam Carroll helped me get some information, so I'll be back in touch, believe me. All right.
Well, it's just like-
Thank you, Dan.